I have received a letter from the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition proposing that a definite matter of public importance be submitted to the House for discussion, namely, the Government's failure to act to protect Australian jobs, including at Toyota, Holden, SPC, Ardmona and Rio Tinto at Gove. I call upon those honourable members who approve of the proposed discussion to rise in their places. I call the Leader of the Opposition.
The government has failed to protect Australian jobs at a range of important Australian employers. There can be no more important obligation on a government, other than the defence of the nation, than to create the economic circumstances where jobs are created and jobs are maintained. We have a major jobs crisis looming in this country. This is not just another day at the office, as the government would have us believe. The roll call of announced job losses since September the 7th, 2013 is a horrendous roll call. Toyota, 2,500 direct jobs. Holden, 2,900 direct jobs. Qantas, 1,000 direct jobs. Rio Tinto at Gove, the refinery, 1,100 jobs. Electrolux in Orange, 544 jobs. Simplot, 110 jobs. Peabody, more than 200 jobs. Caterpillar, 200 jobs. And many other indirect jobs, many other small businesses. What we have here is a government who'd much rather play political games than fight for jobs. We have seen 54,000 jobs lost since this current government has come to power. The challenge of jobs in Australia is a real challenge. We get that. We get that there are challenges in the Australian economy, from the dollar and the fluctuating currency, and the challenge of making sure that we constantly innovate. But the Prime Minister has failed to support Australian manufacturing jobs in particular. He could have done more to keep Holden here. I seriously doubt that he has done anything to try and keep Toyota here, and certainly the car component manufacturers who were here have a very bleak future indeed. This car industry, this poor old car industry, which the government keeps saying, well, it was going to die anyway. What the car industry weren't expecting was the sort of economic euthanasia that the government want to do, where they're just going to pull the plug and speed up the challenges of the car industry. As I said earlier in this House, I have a bit of time for the Minister for Industry. There's a number of government MPs I know are concerned about jobs, including the courageous member for Murray. But what I don't have any time for is a view that says that the loss of jobs is not a catastrophe. We, Labor, in opposition, understand that unemployment is a misery. We stand firmly for making sure not only that people can find work, that people can keep work. People do not choose unemployment or the liberation of unemployment after working for years on a car line at Holden or at Toyota. There is no great life on the unemployment queue. Imagine, if you will, the people who are losing their jobs, many of them in their 50s and 60s. The labour market is incredibly tough. Now, of course, this is a government who say that we're all for the level playing field, that somehow if Australia has any form of industry policy, that's not good economics. First of all, that's lazy economics from the government, who don't understand that it is not a simple proposition that if you don't spend some resources to help companies update and innovate, that somehow you save the money and there is no cost. Why is it that the government so willfully ignore the consequences of companies closing? What is it they don't understand about weeks and weeks and months of people on the unemployment queue and how that saps your morale? How does it help kids of parents who lose their jobs? How does that help the pressure on the families? This is a government who will give you money for marriage counselling, but they just won't help keep your job. And let me tell you, if you don't have a job, that's a bigger pressure on your marriage than some $200 voucher from the member for Menzies. And then when you look at what they won't do, not only do they not have a genuine view about helping Australian jobs, but they're an inconsistent mob opposite. What I fail to grasp is what is so different between a can of SPC baked beans and a Cadbury bar of chocolate. The only difference I see in terms of government policy, well, you'd want to watch out about, there's a health issue, I get that. But what I say is this. Why is it that the government will bail out Cadbury and not talk about helping SPC? If the new definition in Abbotland is you have to be a tourism attraction, well, I tell you what, all the tourism attractions they're creating in the car industry is museums. What are they doing about SPC? They say no one's interested to visit that. I tell you, a lot of people go to the Goulburn Valley because there is a healthy economy there and things to do. If the new test for industry policy is tourism, then why are they bailing out a fish farm in Tasmania, but they won't go to the Gove refinery? In Gove, which I attended last Friday with Senator Nova Peris and the member for Lingiari, I tell you the disaster which is unfolding there. And this is a regional centre. It's a country town. It's a small country town. 4,000 people live there. Last year, Rio Tinto said that if we can get a gas contract from the government of the Northern Territory, we're going to reinvest here for a long time to come. Rio Tinto held a party last year and invited everyone to come once the gas contract was signed, and it was. Then what happens is a CLP minister, Chief Minister Adam Giles, says, we're not doing this contract anymore. Bang, boom, there goes the future. In the time, and then of course Rio Tinto says we're going to shut the refinery, and they're going to do it by August. It's called curtailment in business speak. I call it the loss of livelihood in straight speak. And where is the government? Have they picked up the phone to Rio Tinto? I mean, it's not as if they're not helping Rio Tinto by giving them back hundreds of millions of dollars in mining tax. Why not spend 50 cents, ring Rio Tinto and say, we get that there's 1,000 houses there. We get that there'll only be 200 people with jobs living in those houses. We get that self-funded retirees bought houses in Gove based on the promise of ongoing work. And why don't they ask Rio Tinto to help buy back the houses at the value at which people relied upon when they built them? That's not requiring taxpayer money. That's just requiring a bit of government heart, a little bit of government courage. And why don't they, when they're talking about Gove, for instance, and not limited to Gove, why don't they put some defence facilities there? Why don't they talk about making an educational hub for the Indigenous people who live in the Arnhem Land area? Of course they won't do anything. But what really disturbs me about this government is not their lack of action on Gove, appalling as that is. It's not the fact that they rubbish the food canning workers at SPC. And I agree with Sharman Stone. The government did lie. And they did lie and they told lies about the conditions of food-preserving workers. And they've never apologised to anyone because they're so arrogant they don't know when to admit they're wrong, even when the whole of Australia knows they're wrong. What really disturbs me is they don't have a plan. And we will fight this issue of jobs every day to the next election. Yeah. What really worries me is that we've got a government who won't fight for anything except their own job. We know that this is just not another cycle in manufacturing. We know, and members of the government are on notice, that Labor is saying to you, there is a tide dragging our jobs overseas, and you are all collectively responsible if you don't speak up and do something. I acknowledge the member for Murray. She's actually had some courage. I suspect the Minister for Industry has been mugged by his colleagues, but I think he's shown some signs of a heart. But I tell you what, hearts are in short supply opposite. If this car industry death was such a foregone conclusion, and other than the employment minister who's running around blaming the workers, whatever the question, Senator Betts will blame workers and unions. He's just a pre-programmed automaton on that question. But the real issue is what plan do you have for all these people losing their jobs? What plan do you have? They can't all make chocolate at Cadbury in Tasmania. They can't all work at the fish farm in Tasmania. They can't all work at GrainCorp, who you stop the Americans buying. So it's not as if you're fair dinkum ideologically. You can be as consistent or inconsistent as the politics demands. But what's your plan for real people? What's your plan for the voters and the constituents in your electorates and mine? What do you really think about people who've lost their job? What's your plan to retrain them? Our challenge to you is start fighting for Aussie jobs. Our challenge to those opposite is have a plan for the people who your own neglect and negligence is selling out.
Yeah.